babies. Who are they? Hello, guys. Hello.
In the early days of sled dog racing, breeding was often a haphazard matter, but Susan Butcher knows that good racing dogs don't just happen without careful planning.
Every summer I raise a number of puppies, between 50 and 100 pups. And I'll pick out 2 of my best dogs. Usually if I have a very fast dog, but maybe it doesn't have a good enough coat, I'll breed it to one with a good coat. But the most important thing is that they have bred into them the desire to pull and the desire to travel.
And travel they do, every day with either Susan or her dog handler. These 4-month-old pups are learning that running is fun and that being with people is fun.
There's a lot of mushers that don't really like to make their dogs into pet dogs and feel that they have to keep them very separated and make them a working animal only. But I feel that the best thing that you can do with a dog is to really bond them to yourself. So we're just trying to teach them to respect us and trust us and vice versa. I have to trust my life in their hands all the time, and they should learn to trust me with their life. And then when you're out there racing, that trust is what's going to make you able to win. Are you going to be my next all-time best leader? Are you going to be my all-time best leader?
Every night, Susan and David bring a few dogs into the cabin for extra attention. It's done as part of Susan's training strategy, but also because she quite simply adores her dogs. All but major veterinary chores are handled by Susan herself.
Are you getting full? Okay, put her down.
When one of her lead dogs was critically ill, Susan flew him to Anchorage for treatment. She slept on the vet's floor for 10 nights to be near her dog.
Every fall is a really exciting time for me and for the dogs. As the temperatures get colder, we just develop a certain excitement towards winter. When it starts to get cold, the dogs just start making a lot of noise, running around their chains. They're just antsy. They want to get going. They just show me in many ways that they're ready to roll, ready for the racing season.
All the adult dogs are run 3 to 4 times a week throughout the year. As with all athletes, conditioning is vital to their performance. When snow cover is too thin to be safe for the sled, the dogs pull an all-terrain vehicle left in neutral gear. To some 200 miles of trails, Susan adds new ones each year to keep the dogs from getting bored.
A lot of people would look at my life and think it's a lot of hard work, but for me it's love, and I spend all day long with my dogs and work with them, and I'm my own boss. There's no one telling me what to do or at what time to do. I live way out here where I can go anywhere and do anything at any time of day, and I love that freedom. The best things for long-distance racing dogs are fast trotting speed, and then they have to have good feet, and then you just want them to have a good attitude. Their heads are bent and they're just going for it, and they're paying attention to you and you're paying attention to them, and you just are working as a team.
Like a coach with marathon runners, Susan gradually increases the length of the runs. Her goal is 50 miles without tiring. The dogs, never more happy than when on the trail, joyfully oblige. 12 to 16 hours a day, the routine seldom varies. The culmination in March, the chance to compete in the most punishing race on earth. The mushers, as sled dog drivers are called, brave temperatures that can drop to 40 below. Except for one mandatory 24-hour rest stop, they may sleep only an hour or so each day, and only after the dogs are tended and fed. The route can be potentially treacherous at every turn. In 1985, a moose attacked Susan's dogs, forcing her out of the race. On the last leg of the race, along the frozen Bering Sea, mushers encounter the most severe weather. It is Susan Butcher's 10th day out, and she is trailing, as she has for most of the race. Now a violent storm has forced temperatures to plunge. Swirling snow has obliterated much of the trail. Both Susan and the dogs are pushed to the limit of their endurance. The storm has thwarted her nearest competitors, who have stopped to wait it out. Undaunted, Susan Butcher charges on. In Nome, expectant crowds gather. The ham radio operator at the last checkpoint has reported that the first musher might reach the finish line at any time. In 11 days, 11 hours, and 42 minutes, a jubilant but exhausted Susan Butcher becomes the first person ever to win the Iditarod 3 consecutive times. Susan is a full 14 hours ahead of any other musher. Some will not cross the finish line for several more days. Amazingly, Susan could have made even better time than she did if she had wanted. She put the safety and well-being of the dogs above all else.
It was a matter of either go for a record competing against only father time and no other mushers, and possibly take more out of the team than I like to, or just to take good care of the team and be well satisfied with a victory, and I thought that sounded a lot safer.
Susan and racing enthusiasts everywhere know the real tribute belongs to the bravery, love, and indomitable spirit of these magnificent dogs. On an ordinary street in an ordinary California town, a drama, anything but ordinary, is quietly unfolding. 17-year-old Mike Knowlton was born with spina bifida, a disabling birth defect of the spine that occurs in 1 to 2 out of every 1,000 babies born in the United States.
Good girl. Good girl. Yes, yes. Are you ready for more, Mike?
Mike must be cared for by his parents, Joy and Dale Knowlton, for he is totally paralyzed from the chest down. Mike walked on his own for many years. Then, without warning, his condition worsened.
The last time he was walking was right about here. And at that point in time, he had to have support from one of us to move his legs.
When we were told he was paralyzed and a wheelchair was going to be with him the rest of his life, Michael went into a depression for about 2 years. It was very hard for him to adjust.
Now a dog has come into Mike's life, and the depression has lifted. Her name is Zest.
Zest has made a major change. If I didn't have her, I don't know what I would do. She just really helps me a lot.
A unique organization called Canine Companions for Independence, or CCI, brought Mike and Zest together. Using dogs to guide the blind is a well-known success story. CCI pioneered the idea that dogs could also help the wheelchair-bound. During an intensive 2-week training program, students master 89 commands.
Good girl. No, don't touch, Ziggy.
For their safety, as well as the dogs and the public's, they must gain total control over the animal's actions. CCI instructors have spent 6 months training the dogs.
All right. Good boy.
Get him happy, everybody.
One of the most important jobs is retrieving.
Look, pet it, bring it here.
Keys are especially difficult because of their uneven edges, and dogs dislike the taste of metal.
All right. Good boy.
Because they will be going home to very diverse environments, the teams are put into as many real-life situations as possible during the 2-week course. Today, on a college campus, the dogs encounter some other dogs that at first they think are real.
These are the kind of things you guys need to anticipate and know it's going to come up. These things happen all the time. All right.
Some in the class have driven in vans equipped with electronic lifts, but none has had prior experience with a bus. For the dogs, too, this is a first.
Remember, this is as new for her as it is for you. And even though it's new for you, you have to portray to her that you're confident.
Okay, Jess.
The most frustrating part was having them tell me to have the dog do something, and the dog wouldn't do it, and they wouldn't tell me how to get the dog to do it. But my biggest thing was, would I be able to make it through the 2 weeks? Because I kind of had doubts.
Jess. No, Jess. Jess. Come on, Jess.
She should come to you, not go around behind there. She doesn't understand that concept.
Okay, so what I do to get her?
You need to do what you need to take care of yourself and your dog.
I got to start over again.
The sheer physical exertion would cause some to simply give up, but Mike is determined. Finally, he and Zest are successful. Even for those with the use of their arms, fatigue is a major factor that often keeps them housebound. Dogs are a wonderful solution, for they will pull tirelessly. At the end of the 2 weeks, the last hurdle is the final exam. Of the more than 300 teams that have gone through CCI since it began in 1975, 90% of dogs and humans have passed.
We'd like to give them a chance to wrap it up.
In this group, everyone has succeeded, and they gather to celebrate.
Training a dog is a lot more. There's a lot more going into it than I thought. But last 2 weeks I've learned a lot, and it was fun. But I wouldn't want to do it again.
With well-deserved pride, the class arrives for graduation, threshold to their new independence.
As you can see, this is quite a loving team. And throughout their lives, there's always going to be a lot of love and commitment on the part of these two. Mike worked very hard in this class, and so did Zest, and congratulations to both of you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike and Ziggy.
The diplomas, appropriately, are inscribed with both names, student and dog alike.
Mike and Zest.
Today, Mike is a high school senior. Having Zest has helped Mike vastly broaden his horizons, and now, for the first time, he is considering going on with his education. A vocational school, where he thinks he might study computer science. Whenever Mike is working, Zest has been trained to rest quietly by his side and not disrupt the classroom. But at those moments when he needs her help, Zest knows it's time to work.
She does things like picks up papers or pens. It makes me feel independent. I don't always have to ask somebody. I can just go to Zest and tell her.
All CCI graduates report a dramatic rise in self-esteem because of the dog's role as icebreaker. People who normally feel awkward approaching a person in a wheelchair do not feel uncomfortable in the presence of the dog.
I'm real shy. And the last couple of months, it seems like it's easier to go up to people because most of the time people come up to her and I kind of get into the conversation. So it helps me to get to know people.
We didn't realize that kind of a bond could be between a dog and a person. It really gives us a different perspective. We didn't realize that the dog could do as much for Michael's emotions as this dog has done.
Okay, Zest. Come here. Zest, do I look? Do I help twitch, Zest? Do I test it? Test it? Come on. Okay, Zest. Come on. Do I go to bed?
A boy needing help and a loving canine at his side. Perhaps nowhere is the age-old covenant between man and dog more poignantly felt than here. In Northern California, one man remembers a partnership with dogs that many people have never even heard of. For the 13 months he served in Europe during World War II, Joe Simpson fought alongside a dog. They were one of the earliest teams in what was known as the Canine Corps.
In 1942, the Canine Corps was formed by a group of civilians from the New England Dog Training Club. And Dogs for Defense was formed at the same time, and they picked 14 GIs out of 5,000 volunteers. And fortunately, I was one of the 14 picked, not because I knew anything about dogs necessarily, but because I was in the horse business. And this is how I got started in the Canine Corps.
Patriotic families everywhere across America volunteered their dogs to help the war effort. Rovers, Spots, and Fidos of all descriptions were sent off to an uncertain future in the Army, Marines, or Coast Guard. Like their human counterparts, all dogs were examined for fitness.
Any new man that came in got a new dog. And they taught us to make the dogs heel and sit and down and stay and all the obedience commands. And these dogs then went through the training with the master. And then when that was through, certain ones that were fit for attack training, if they had enough aggressiveness in them, were put into attack classes. And the dogs that were better for messenger work were trained for that. Some dogs were trained for pack dogs. So it was quite a course.
In Europe, dogs were used in World War I, but this was our first use of them in combat. Some 10,000 served in many of the bloodiest battles across Europe and the South Pacific.
If we needed to send a message back to the forward outpost, we had a messenger collar that we'd put the message in and put it around the dog. And the dog had to learn that when this collar was on him, he was to run as fast as he could back to the other master.
Messenger dogs had to develop equal loyalty to two masters because they worked by going from one to the other. To ignore the noise and flames from exploding shells was hardest to teach.
The dogs didn't have to reach up and tap us on the shoulder to tell us there was some Germans over there. We knew by watching our dog and being able to read the dog. This is very important with anyone working a dog. If you can read the dog, then you'll know what the dog is trying to tell you. And I owe my life to my dog, and I'm sure a lot of the other handlers would say the same thing.
Joe Simpson was one of many who brought their dogs home after the war. Intensive demilitarization programs retrained the animals before they were allowed to return to civilian life as the gentle and loving pets they had originally been. One phase of training similar to that for war dogs is used in search and rescue work. More than 70 such groups now exist across the United States. All volunteers, they work alongside law enforcement teams in wilderness rescues and the aftermath of disasters.
Go through? No cheat.
It takes hundreds of hours of training before a team can be sent on a mission.
Go through.
Early on, a dog often needs to be coaxed.
Okay, try that way again. Want to go through? Go. Go through all the way. Oh, good girl. Good girl.
What handlers look for is not the breed itself. Many breeds are used, but qualities like intelligence, curiosity, and self-confidence. The dogs must be taught agility so they can safely negotiate boulders and other obstacles in the woods, as well as piles of disaster rubble. Shirley Hammond is both a handler and a trainer.
What we do is we start the dogs out very young if we can, although we can start older dogs, teaching them on an agility course. We do a lot of ladder climbing with the dogs, and this teaches them to use their back feet. Their back feet just normally follow their front feet, and they do not develop a knowledge of back feet unless they're taught to do something, feeling what they're putting it on and feeling for stability with it.
Good dog, Tasha! Good girl! Good dog!
This 12-week-old puppy confronts a ladder for the first time. In addition to the obstacle course, they train on a rubble pile that simulates a disaster area. The uniform and helmet signal to Shirley's dog, Cinnamon, that now they are working. Trained not to follow her instincts to jump off the unstable boards, Cinnamon zigzags across the rubble in what is known as air scenting, trying to pick up the victim's scent on the air currents. She has been trained to cover the entire area thoroughly. Once the victim, in this case a volunteer, has been found, the dog's job is to scratch and bark to alert the handler to the area with the most intense scent.
We put that one back. Is he there? Oh, look up there! What did you find, Sid?
Finding the victim is the dog's primary reward. It is essential that physical contact be made so the dog knows she's done her job well.
Yeah, you found him. You've got him where you want him now, boy. Yeah, I got him where I want him.
That was good.
Did you find him, huh?
That was a good search.
In 1985, Shirley and Cinnamon were one of 13 U.S. search dog teams that made a vital contribution in a real-life disaster, a devastating earthquake that racked Mexico City. The soft subsoils underlying the city and inadequate building codes were blamed when hundreds of buildings collapsed. Thousands were injured, thousands more left homeless. As many as 10,000 died.
It was really hard to believe because there were buildings standing with glass and beautiful structures that were just pancaked to the floor. This is a building that was 11, 12, 14 stories. Suddenly it's down to 10, 20, 30 feet high because some of them actually sank down into their basements. They went that far down.
In you go.
12 hours a day for a week, the teams searched through the twisted rubble. Hundreds of people surely lay trapped, But where? And could the dogs find any of them in time?
Stay. They'd cock their head and listen with their ears as if maybe they might even be able to hear the victims after they would bark, as if they were kind of calling to them by their barking. And the other side of that coin, of course, is when they did locate someone buried under the rubble that was gone, deceased. It was a very low-key reaction, just a little pawing and a little whining.
Amazingly, even at week's end, victims were found still clinging to life. Only hours old when the quake hit, this baby was trapped for 9 days. Doctors cannot easily explain her survival. Others see it simply as a gift from God.
The Mexican people were just wonderful to us, and it was a warm, warm feeling. They were so appreciative of our being there, and it was really a very unique position to know that you were doing something that was helpful and that your dog was able to do it. And it's a feeling that says, this is what we've done it for. All the times we've been wet, we've been cold, we've been tired, we've been hot. This is real, and it's so exciting. So exciting.
Many thousands of years ago, some long-forgotten caveman welcomed a wild animal into his home to share his fire and food. Through the centuries, the dogs that evolved have remained our enduring helpmates and unfaltering friends. Our own success as a species is due in no small measure to the fact that a canine partner has been by our side. Intelligent and loyal beyond measure, dogs ask little from us in return for their unquestioning devotion. In fact, most dogs do not see work as work, but thrive on serving us, simply for the praise of a job well done.
Yep.
In commenting on this age-old partnership, one author has written, "We give them the love we can spare, the time we can spare, the room we can spare. In return, dogs have given us their absolute all. It is, without a doubt, the best deal man has ever made."